Yes, as a very short introduction, because we don't have much time, only to say that yes, the cities are attracting a lot of people, a lot of different people, and of course that creates a different and new stratification of societies in those cities, which makes it for more diversity, and of course we have to respond to the question, how do we make that work? How do we make cities work for all the people that are living there? We have a few elements to discuss. We will discuss, of course, inclusiveness, that's the point, but we will also discuss vulnerability. We will also share with you a number of city for all concepts or models that are in place. Different speakers will introduce a little bit where they come from, because they all have different background, and then they will give you, in a very short period, their views. We go for a presentation of all of them, so if you have questions, you please write them down on a piece of paper, and as soon as we have the first round of discussion, we open up the floor for you to ask for more. Without further ado, and with this respect for gender approach, I will give the floor to our two gentlemen here, because they will have to leave a little bit before the others, so apologies for that. It's your turn around that. So maybe we start with you, Ashish.
So I think I will put my slides to come up to help me share what I have to talk about. I am Ashish. I represent ICLE, Local Governments for Sustainability, South Asia. We are a global network of cities and also based here in Delhi, working with around 60 plus cities in India. Cities usually who are members and non-members, and working on sustainable development for cities initiatives. So today I'm wanting to share with you some information on one engagement that we've been part of, thanks to the support from the European Commission together with ASCI in 4 cities. And I would use the information about work done in this project to tell you a little bit about what we are doing with cities and how this could be taken further as well. So this is the project for promotion of inclusive, sustainable growth and diversity. In short, PROMISE. We've implemented it together with the ASCI and 4 cities. If you can have the next slide, please. So you have to move the slides faster so that I can close in time. The background about how urbanization is happening and the status of our cities we know well, but I want to highlight 2 points. The fact that when we are talking about infrastructure provision, so when we're talking about infrastructure provision in cities, often there's very little stress and attention on last mile of this infrastructure and its provision. And also to keep in mind, when as city governments we are trying to provide infrastructure and services in cities, we make decisions for investments which are covering the vast majority that are residents within these cities, but specific needs of individual groups such as youth, very young children, elderly, women, business communities, other vulnerable groups, the poor, these get lesser priority because we feel that they will catch on and they will become part of the larger good that we are trying to achieve. So the focus of our engagement was to try and address this gap that we noticed existing in our cities, and how we can help working with cities, city governments to address this wider gap. The engagement has been in 4 partner cities that we've worked with. So this is Karnal Municipal Corporation, there is Jabalpur Municipal Corporation, Ajmer Municipal Corporation, and Warangal Municipal Corporation. The engagement lasted from 2016 to June 2019, And what we did during this engagement was, in the 4 cities, we worked on 4 thematic areas covering water supply, sewerage, open spaces, waste management and mobility. So mobility was focused on the city of Karnal, and we engaged deeply in one ward, that is ward number 11. On waste, we engaged in depth with Ajmer city on one ward, that is ward number 60, and Warangal similarly on open spaces on specific wards and Jabalpur as well. And the aim of the engagement was to go down deep, interacting with communities and citizens to understand, appreciate if infrastructure and services are being provided in the city, what is that is lacking in terms of outcomes and aims that we are wanting to achieve as a city that is trying to provide infrastructure to our citizens, and how is it that we can probably, through communication, through interaction, identify the gaps and fill those gaps as well. So specifically, I think I will just give one example, and the others you can have a look at it. If you see in Karnal, we engaged on mobility, and through engagement with the city government, a stakeholder community that was formed in the city, and deeper engagement at the identified ward with the ward councillor and representatives of various groups, we try to understand what is it that is happening on pedestrian movement, on public transport, on areas that could become non-motorized for the city, and how is it that we could do it addressing the needs of specific groups, the groups that I mentioned, but here specifically we also talked about the women and trader community that will be impacted by decisions that the city is making. Similar work was done in the other cities as well. So Jabalpur we looked at sewerage, and Warangal we looked at public spaces, and a large component of this was about making public spaces better, but also engaging with the private sector to see if they could become guardians and take care of the private spaces, offering it to the citizens through engagement with the municipal corporation. So detailed documentation was done during this engagement, and these are pictures just showing you how we engage with various communities, residents, through group discussions, through questionnaire surveys, and then checked it with municipal corporation through meetings, stakeholder groups to understand that we are in the right track and how we could proceed on this and take the discussion further. Basis this kind of deeper engagement, we developed an action plan for the cities that we have worked with. Some of those actions that we suggested are already implemented. Some of them are getting implemented as we move further with actions getting implemented through the various missions that the national government is supporting, be it smart cities or Amrut or others. So this is the kind of deeper engagement that we did, checking back with the community, but then of course going back to the city to know what their views are, whether we are going on the right track, and whether there are certain suggestions that we could take back to the community before offering it as final solutions that get documented and implemented. So this is what it is in a nutshell. Finally, the engagement process that we followed, we documented it as a tool that is available online for people to see and use for future action. And this is a tool that covers all the 4 thematic areas, and this approach that is looking at overall the city, then the sector, and then at existing level of service in specific groups, and how we could improve it over time. I have limited time, so I would just want to arrive at learnings. I think there are many, but 3 key learnings are: one, that the cities are still to grasp on what to communicate, how to communicate, and why to communicate with their citizens. And it's a very important aspect of how inclusive development happens in cities, because if there is communication, people can come on board and benefit from what is intended to benefit them. Another is that data and its importance in use is something that still needs effort and work. There is ownership issues, and there are issues on how much to make public and available to other communities to use and make people benefit out of it. So this is it. I think the tool is available online. One important aspect I want to mention is during the engagement that we had in 4 cities, in I think all of the 4 cities, during the time that we engaged, we saw 3 commissioners changed at least in each of the city, and I think 2 of the cities, there were 2 mayors who moved. So it's a very critical thing about how decision making happens in cities and how changes that we are recommending take root in cities while things are happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. I think without further ado, we will invite my neighbor, Mr. Anwar, for his introduction, and then if there are any questions for the 2 gentlemen, we'll open the floor right after. Both of them will have to speak for the airport very soon. Mr. Anwar.
Well, thank you, Jerome, and what I'm going to do is to speak about, of course, required inclusive cities, but maybe what are the challenges, and mainly from the perspective of the state, and how cities are actually responding. I mean, is that also in their capacity or not? And some of the interventions that have happened in the country, which actually show some sign, some real. But before I go into that, I think we must know where we are placed in India, and I'm sure you have those data in the macro statistics. 40% of the people already live in the urban India, because when we take into account the statutory and non-statutory towns. But something very interesting is there that is happening in the Indian cities. That is, around 67% of the GDP comes from the Indian cities, and 90% of the total government revenue comes from the Indian cities. So that is, I think, something which we must keep into mind. And at the same time, I think it is also important that if we see 3 decades of urbanization, especially the post-1990s, there is kind of transformation that has taken place in the Indian cities, and the transformation is also in the policy paradigm. That transformation is where you are asking the cities from being mere managers to being city entrepreneurs. So cities trying, I mean, you see, the change in the cities that we're witnessing is, cities are being asked to work like an entrepreneur, where you have to attract investment, where you have to build in the reforms. And in this investment, so the point is, in this investment, have we been able to bring out the vulnerable, the marginalized communities into the mainstream, or have we increased the vulnerability? I think the latest Oxfam report starkly reminds us. I mean, the report that was placed in the World Economic Forum, what does it speak about? I mean, if you go by the Indian statistics, just 63 people own revenue which is more than the Indian budget. That is what has happened in 3 decades. Not just that, this humongous gap in the poor and the rich. I mean, if you measure the inequity in India, the 10% top asset holders and the top 10% bottom asset holders, the gap in rural India is 500 times. Just guess, Shakti, what is there in urban India? It's 50,000 times. This is what we are talking about. 50,000 times is the gap. Now, how do we intervene? I think one of the forms, I mean, which is, because I have been the deputy mayor of Shillong for 5 years, directly elected, and now I run a national coalition, I mean, I'm part of a national coalition on inclusive and sustainable urbanization. I'm also kind of supervising a vision document for Leh. So, I mean, through all these experiences, I think one thing is the crux. I mean, we have to go back to the basics. And this is what we were discussing in Habitat 3 Quito, where John Cross screamingly kept on reminding us that, look, we have to go back to the basics, and we have to get rid of this whole business of laissez-faire. I mean, this whole free market economy to make cities competitive. Can there be a competition between a city like Simla, which was developed by the Britishers, and a city like Ahmedabad, where the nuances are completely different, where the engineering structures are completely different? I don't know how much do they pay for producing water, but in Simla it costs around 120 rupees per kiloliter. So what kind of competition are we talking about? I think that is what we have to keep in mind. But at the same time, I think it is also important that when we speak about going back to the basics of planning, who is planning the city? I mean, it's all good. I mean, we make small interventions. Who is planning the city? I don't know. But that's a problem. And when you do a conference in such an exotic place, you know, people are bound to go out. I know the mayor of Ahmedabad is here, but she was screamingly campaigning against saying that 4 important developmental projects in Ahmedabad. And remember, I'm talking about a city where the political party at the state, at the national, and the city is the same. 4 important developmental projects, that's the river, Sabarmati, that's the smart cities, the bus system, all are being done under the SPV minus the city government. Who's planning the city? The Delhi government, the Delhi Development Authority, it's not political, it's not answerable to the people. Cities are not planning for its citizens. How can you make cities inclusive? It's bullshit. I mean, how can you even, imagine, you are running a city, but the planning is done by, you have the development authorities in Mumbai, you have the development authorities in Gurgaon. These development authorities which are not answerable to anybody. Let's see, I think that is, so the point is, how do we engage with that? I think that is something very important. And because the repository happens to be the city government. And you see, I'm not a great champion of strengthening the institution of the mayor. Of course, you have to strengthen the institution of the mayor. After all, the mayor is directly elected after every 5 years or whatever. But the point is, the people have to plan. The whole slogan of right to the city. Where is that engagement? Do we find that engagement? And I'll come to the smart city, but before that, take for example the institutions of the mayor. Okay, 2 minutes there. In Panjim, the term of the mayor is 1. Do you know what is the term of the mayor in Panjim? I think 1 year. You have 2.5 years. I was there for 5 years because I was a directly elected mayor, deputy mayor. And in Chandigarh, the mayor's term is 1 year. So Madam Jaswala used to very funnily ask her, now what do you do in a year? She said, no, it's very fine. 3 months, it's welcome parties, and 3 months, farewell parties. That is what we are doing. And my daughter always used to talk about what is the job. And what do you do? I said, cut the ribbon, kiss the child. That's what the mayor does. Keep on cutting the ribbons. This is not the way how we can make cities sustain. I think we have to bring in a paradigm shift. And what is the paradigm shift that we have witnessed over the last 6 years with the new government? The paradigm shift is that from monetization of land, now we have even gone ahead for privatization of governance. And that's the SPP model. Highly exclusive. Well, we have mayors sitting, ask them. They're from the same party, the party that is ruling the country. Ask them. They will share what is happening. I mean, are the mayors just there for garbage collectors? They are actually garbage collectors, nothing more than that. That is not the way how we can run the cities, and I think it's a serious issue that. So, I mean, the school of thought that I come from, I think what is important is that there's the huge, humongous surplus that gets extracted from the cities, which make these cities exclusive. And mind you, it's also important the kind of ghettoization that is taking place. Because if we have to make the cities inclusive, the social context that I'm talking about, what happened in Delhi, this will further consolidate ghettoization. How do you get rid of it? Give planning back to the cities. That's important. Else, what is going to be, the last thing that I want to say. Else, what is going to happen? We all know who got the Nobel Prize this year. Together we were in a panel, Mr. Banerjee and I. Nobody remembers who got the Nobel Prize last year in economics. Even I don't remember that name, but I know what he's done. Else, what is going to happen is, if we mayors and we people who are engaged in the cities do not come forward, do not make those forums consolidate, press upon the national government, then the person who got the Nobel Prize is, the slogan is, charter out your city to somebody else. It's a Holocaust. Charter out cities. Lastly, I think what is important is, what is the connection? The connection happens to be with a political representative, elected. There is a right that a citizen accrues. With the commissioner or with the bureaucrat, there is a need that accrues. We have to choose between, in governance, between a right and a need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I may, for the sake of time, I will simply, I think there was a good point on governance, it's free speech. I will open up for some of you if you wish to ask a question to our two last speakers, if that's easier, because then we will have to leave and then we carry on with the 6 others. So please, the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes. Can take the microphone to people. Anyone? It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but I think the last speech just gets some of you awake. Not enough? If there is no question, I will offer to both of you, maybe starting from Ashish, to give us your preliminary conclusion, what do you see as the key element for this session in terms of promoting inclusive city? What is your best takeaway from your own experience? I mean, you have presented us your experience from the planning to the implementation. So the key element that people should leave the room with and think about after you're left. One single point in 1 minute.
The mic there. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's difficult to come to conclusion based on just my presentation and some conversation from Dick and the staff. It would be nice to be able to hear other presenters. However, I try and wrap up two of my learnings and findings from the work that we did into something that could be a step that becomes the next things to be done at the city level, and that's importantly about communication. As city governments, as people who are elected and supposed to be representing the cities, it is very important for us as cities to know what we want to communicate, why we want to communicate, and how we want to communicate. For this, a very important part of communication is data, because we want to know who are we communicating to and what is it that we are able to communicate better on. There seems to be, through our engagement, we saw a kind of hesitance from the city on communicating and engaging with their own citizens, not being sure of how this would go further. And I feel this is totally not something that we would like to see happening in the cities. If we want people to use the infrastructure that we have built, things that we are doing for their benefit, get absorbed by the citizens, we need to engage with them. And that's something that's a big step for inclusivity. So that's something that should be promoted in the country.
Thank you very much. I give you also 1 minute. The key point that you want people to take away?
The key point according to me, Jerome, is give the city back to its citizens. Let them plan the city. And just create a structure where the citizens are engaged in the entire process of planning. And and how much data is good data? I don't want to go into that debate of those details right now, but you see this paranoia about technology and technology providing all the solutions, I think we have to give a caution to it. For the simple reason, I remember one of the conferences that we attended, and biodiversity is such a large issue. And one person said, one scientist, he said, no problem, let the honey, we have a connection. Honeybees die, we don't remain, and the human species are extinct. It's no problem, we'll have robotic honeybees. Can you imagine? It's obnoxious. So I think so basically get the city back to the citizens, allow them, and that is the only way how you can make them. I also know, this is what we discussed informally when we were walking on the beach last night. We also know that one of the biggest hurdle comes from the elected institution. Please don't take it, I have been elected. 50% to 60% of our elected councillors are proxy contractors. We also know that. But the point is, how do you break that jinx and give the planning and the city back to its people? I think that is what we have to really think about. We may create tools about that. Like we have the 74th Constitutional Amendment. I was a member of the National Task Force to review the 74th Constitutional Amendment. But where are we after 25 years down the line? I think those 18 and last, there are two functions universally handed over to the cities. And we have OSCA, they've done a study. Then we have ICLE, they've done a study. Then we have lots of people who have done it. Two functions universal that have been handed over to the cities. A, when you and I are born, the birth certificate comes from the city government. And when you and I die, the death certificate comes from the city government. Rest, in many places, you will find different functions. That is not the way to make cities sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those preliminary conclusions. Ashish Tikandar, that was good to have you here. We don't want to keep you and for you to miss the flight, because we will have to discuss with you the rest of the night then. Feel free to stay for a few minutes, and whenever you're ready, you can go. Okay? And I would suggest, Doctor, just to be now gender sensitive a bit, Professor Ghosh, maybe you have the floor.
Thank you, Jerome, and good afternoon, everybody. Can we have the presentation? Okay, while it's getting loaded, let me just give a brief background. I'll be just talking about a project which NIUA has been doing with European Commission funding, partnering with IDS Sussex. And this is a 3-year project, 2 years of which we have completed. As you can see from the name, to take on a bit from what Mr. Panwar was talking. So we are all talking of smart cities, we are all talking of everything getting smart, the cities are getting smart overnight and everything is fine. But capacity building for smart data and inclusive cities is a project which helps us to look at smartness through the lens of data. Now, when we are talking of data, okay. So we have worked on 4 of the smart cities in India, Bhopal and Jabalpur in Madhya Pradesh, and Kochi in Kerala, and Faridabad in Haryana. And I will not say we have worked or engaged with, rather I would say that we have built relationships with these 4 cities for the past 2 years, because we have tried to help them So the overall objective of this project is not really to try and put in some technological solution to make the city smart overnight, but basically to strengthen the technical and institutional capacities. Now, what does one mean by strengthening the institutional and technical capacities? It is that when we're talking of making a city smart through some solution, the basic trait which we see is trying to make the city smart through some external help, either through a consultant-driven solution or an externality. But very few times do we see that the solution or in the endeavor to make a city smart, we are building the capacities of those who are actually going to be implementing it or using it at a later stage. So we started our activities in these 4 cities by trying to see, because we were working with smart cities and our point of contact were the SPVs, we realized that the SPVs were very limited in their roles because they had a laundry list of projects which they needed to implement in the tenure they have been given under the mission. And for them it was a tick box that, okay, this project has been tendered out, work order has been given, and then finally that this project has been implemented. Now, in that whole race of trying to tender out a project and implementing it, seldom was it seen that the people who are working about building the project, from starting with preparing the DPR and then implementing the project, the involvement of the people who are actually, by involvement of the people, I mean the people in the corporation and the people, larger people or the citizens of the city. So when we try to focus on particular projects in trying to trace the project end to end, a lot of interesting things were thrown up to us. Wow, just 2 minutes? Okay. So I will just give you an example from a project. Like, we did some deep diving into projects which were generating a lot of data. Because I'm talking of data and inclusivity, we tried to see or focus on certain projects and try to trace the process. When I'm talking of process, as I said, the project, since when the DPR was formed and then it was implemented, who are the players in this project, what are their functions and the roles, and what is the kind of work they do. So when the Smart City SPV was developed and the mission came into being, a lot of projects were already running in the corporation with a lot of stakeholders involved in its functioning. So what the Smart City did, and taking the example of Jabalpur here with its solid waste management project, which is, by the way, an awarded project under the mission. we tried to trace all the players and what was their function and what is it that we're doing. So the normal process of collecting the garbage, transporting it to the waste to energy plant and then creating energy out of it, this was a flow which was happening. Now when the smart city SPV came into play and they started and they wanted to do something smart about it, they said, why don't we insert another layer into this project? Why don't we do an RFID tagging into this project? It will help you monitor the project. Now, mind you, the 20-year contract with the consultant and the corporation was already in place, which was utilizing this and doing the project entirely. And then suddenly this layer of RFID tagging came in, which was trying to show. And when the consultant said, okay, all you have to do is just once you collect the garbage, you have to punch the tag in the buildings. So when it started, there was a dashboard created, money was put in, and that dashboard started doing a self-monitoring. The moment an RFID tag was done, it would blink, and when it was not done, it would also blink. So at the end, it took about 6 months for the consultant to realize that what they were doing was a self-monitoring example, and they were being asked about it. So suddenly one fine day they said, no, this is not part of our contract and this RFID tagging cannot be done by us and we cannot do this. This was not what we signed out for. And it was stopped abruptly. So the point is that so much of investment of money, technology, manpower, time had gone into building a thing, and at the moment that project is entirely dead. It's not happening anymore and it's gone back to the original point of just collecting garbage and transporting it to the thing. So through this, I just want to emphasize on one point that it's not. Is it okay? I'll just quickly.
Thank you.
So no, I just half a minute. I just want to tell you that we had done 2-3 examples like this, and all the 4 cities we had extensively spoken and worked with the multiple stakeholders and tried to show and explain to them that data per se, collection of data and being able to utilize that data for what we call data-driven governance does not happen overnight, and it's not always through technology infusion it can happen. So city also needs to be prepared enough, because this was Jabalpur, and on the other hand we had Bhopal, where we have piloted a blockchain project with their ICCC. That is simply because Bhopal is prepared to be able to implement it and they have accepted it as part of one of their smart city projects. We also have Faridabad and Kochi, where the system is different. Public participation is so intense that everything has to be passed through the house. So there our strategy has been different. So I will not get into the details for the paucity of time. Anybody who wants to know more can get back to me. But the bottom line is that one size fit all doesn't apply. You have to take a different approach for every city, looking at their preparedness and looking at their willingness to be able to implement it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We take 1 minute to give a memento to our 2 colleagues, Ashish and Tikender, and then we wish you well for the rest of the afternoon. Maybe just stand there and our colleagues will just come.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we had the pleasure of listening to Mr. Tikender and Ashish, and since they had to leave early, the All India Institute of Local Self-Government would like to show them our love and affection and give them away some lovely mementos depicting Goa. And to do the honors for Mr. Tikender Singh, I would like to invite Mr. A.K. Jain of the All India Institute of Local Self-Government to kindly felicitate Mr. Tikender Singh. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Mr. A.K. Jain and Mr. Tikender Singh. He spoke from the heart. Also inviting Sunil Velankar to do the honors for Ashish Gurpade. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Tikender. With love from Goa to Shimla. And requesting Mr. Sunil Velankar to kindly come forward and felicitate Ashish Gurpade. Thank you, Mr. Ashish. You were wonderful. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. A round of applause as well. May both of you have a safe flight. Only make sure that you don't go to each other's destinations. Thank you very much.
Very encouraging. Yeah.
It's over to the chair, Dr. Jerome Pons, Head of Corporation, European Union.
Very good. Thank you very much. Dr. Kostoud, I wanted to give you the floor just to confuse people in the order of things. Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you to All India Institute of Local Self-Government, European Union, and National Institute for Urban Affairs for giving me this opportunity to present one experience from one of our projects that we have been implementing in 3 Indian cities: Ajmer in Rajasthan, Jhansi in Uttar Pradesh, and Muzaffarpur in Bihar. So let me start with a kind of generic framework that what do we understand by inclusive cities. An inclusive city emphasizes on 3 minimum aspects. One is the spatial inclusion, another is the social inclusion, and another is economic inclusion. Our project, Engage Citizens Responsive Cities in these 3 cities, emphasized on at least 2 aspects of it. One is looking at the social inclusion, and it sort of transcends the social inclusion into the spatial inclusion. And we believe that participation, particularly participation of the most marginalized communities, who mostly live in the slums and urban informal settlements, their participation should be the cornerstone in making a city inclusive. But the question is that, when is participation enabled? From our viewpoint, participation is enabled when citizens are informed and they are made aware, when they are organized, and when they have voices and choices. And they also need some institutional space where they can provide their suggestions and contribute to the decision making in the cities. So in a way, the Engaged Citizens Responsive City project followed this theory of change. And all the activities that we have done in the last 4 years in these 3 cities was organized around these 4 elements. So this city, as I said, that the major focus was to strengthening the organizations of civil society of the urban core to participate in the planning, monitoring of sanitation services in Indian cities. And we conceptualized this project in the backdrop of Swachh Bharat mission. And in the Swachh Bharat mission, the guidelines clearly indicated that citizen participation, citizen engagement needs to be transformed into a Jan Andolan. So we sort of captured that imagination and tried to conceptualize how citizens can be enabled to participate in the decision-making process of who gets sanitation services, how much, and when and where. So this particular project followed 2 distinct but interrelated processes. One process was in relation to the participation of the urban core, another was citizens at large and other stakeholders. And we made a distinction of these 2 processes because it is not always easy for urban core to participate in the decision-making process of the city. So what we started with, challenging the main problem for the urban core, and that challenge is the invisibility within the city. And this invisibility comes from the undercounting in two ways. One is the undercounting of the number of slums or number of informal settlements that one recognizes that exist in the city, but then also invisibility comes within the settlements where which households are included in the program. So what we did, like city-wide mapping of the informal settlements, and as well as mapping of all the households, looking at the kind of services that they are getting in terms of urban sanitation services. And this was not a third-party driven or consultant-driven mapping of services. The communities, young people, boys and girls were trained. So we made a point that we are not going to get outside help other than the community facilitation part and the training part, but the actual survey will be done by the community, the young people. And then, based on that data, based on the information that was generated by the community, they prepared settlement-wide plan, settlement-wise plan, and those plans were shared with the municipalities. And this sharing became a point, where the trust building happened between the elected council members, mayors, and other civil society groups, along with the urban poor, who were organized in each settlements through settlement improvement committees. Very quickly, the process that we followed to engage other citizens, activating the existing resident welfare associations, or where there is no associations of the middle class, then we try to form them, then citywide participatory assessment of sanitation services, and again joint planning with the municipalities. Just to conclude, a couple of points in terms of the impact of the project. One is it has established in all these three cities that how a bottom-up citizen-centric process can include the urban poor and give them the voice. Second is the city-wide participation, and really it has been scaled up from the settlement level to the city level, and provisioning of sanitation services and other entitlements. So through this project, the Swachh Bharat mission implementation in these three cities have really become a demand-driven project and demand-driven initiative as opposed to a supply-driven initiative. And throughout the process, multi-stakeholder partnership, whether it is citizen to citizen, citizen to ULB, and citizen to other civil society groups. So let me stop here, and in the course of discussion, if you have any specific question, I will attend to it. I will be very happy to answer them. I wish we had a couple of more minutes. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe just before I will give the floor to Clémentine. That's right. Valentine. That's right. Valentine L'Enfant. Just one quick question on the monitoring part, if you don't mind. Do you want to take 1 minute to explain how you have this engagement with monitoring? Because in terms of planning policy, it's of course very useful and it's essential, but the monitoring is the aspect of getting the feedback to the people that are implementing. So how do you get that part, the inclusiveness in that part?
Well, at the heart of it was the citizen-led data collection process and data analysis process. Many times, many initiatives include citizens in the data collection, but the data is extracted from the community, is taken outside the community. But in this process, the data was collected by the community, and the real ownership of data was with the community. And therefore, that data was used for monitoring. And first time when you collect data at a settlement level, that becomes the baseline. And the work that is being done over the period, then again you do the similar survey, because it is the community-driven survey, and they have been doing this periodically, so they could see the progress made in settlement by settlements. So that was an important element in that process. And therefore, it's not only collecting data and analyzing the data at the community level, but building leadership within the community so that they can effectively engage with the urban local bodies, the officials, and many times because of lack of mistrust or because of the mistrust, any dialogue between citizens who are deprived or historically deprived of the services, and the discussion with the urban local body officials becomes almost like in a quarrel. But how do you, in a way, nurture leadership who can effectively communicate? And Ashish was talking about communication from the ULB to the citizens, but in this case also communication from the citizens to the urban local bodies. And it has to be a two-way process. So these elements can be scaled up at the city level, but also the processes can be designed in such a way and integrated within the policy area, which can then be scaled up in every cities of this country. So that's the essential part of monitoring.
Thank you very much. And scaling up, I think, is an important element here. Valentine L'Enfant, Agence Française de Développement, please, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this session and explaining. So, very quickly, I represent ALD, the French Development Agency, with the French Development Bank, and we have been present in India for about 11 years now, committing about 2 billion euros, mostly in urban infrastructure, with a very strong focus on transport and energy. We funded a lot of metro, for example. And after 10 years of present here, I think it was a good moment also to take stock and to kind of fill the gap, understand how we can strengthen our approach and how we can make those infrastructure more integrated in the urban fabric, how do we make sure that those infrastructure are service, that we can access it, that everybody can access it, and to really involve the citizen in that kind of process. So one example, one flagship project that we are pushing and that illustrates, I think, very well this approach is the Cities program. I'm very glad to present that program side by side with the EU and NIUF, who are two very strong partners of this program. We did co-constructed with MOA, with NIUF, with the implementing agency for that program. And with the European Union, who's providing a 6 million euro grant, basically made that whole technical assistance possible. So the Cities program unravels around 3 major steps. The first one is a national call for projects, which selected 12 smart city projects back in last February. It's been 1 year. The second component mentioned on that slide is a state component, where we partner with the state of Andhra Pradesh to provide the technical assistance component and capacity building components, mostly focusing on integrated urban development. And the third one is a national component on which we are trying to capitalize on all that knowledge, because as I will emphasize it later, this is a very innovative project for us, and I think we are all learning through this process. So we are trying to keep track of that learning and share it as much as possible, gather some data, and move toward a more outcome-oriented approach. So those are the how do we concretely push for that inclusive approach and that inclusivity. So those are the 12 cities that are selected. Maybe one first point is that that's a bottom-up approach. Usually as a donor, we fund one project, we know exactly what we're going to fund and what are the features. In that process, we allow the city to apply and to present one of their most innovative and ambitious and inclusive projects. So those 12 cities have been selected because they demonstrated excellence in sustainability, in innovation, and in participatory approach. One example is that we have 3 projects looking at smart schools, for example, which is something we did not anticipate at all. They came in different sections because Gladden is there, Vizag is there, and Chennai is there. So this really allowed us also to target exactly what are the needs at the city level. We also changed as we were mentioning, it's an innovative program because we changed the product itself. We have smaller scale projects. Usually we found a finance project under 50 million euros. It's a very big infrastructure project. In those cases, the city are receiving grants from 2 to 10 million. So it's a whole other scale. It allows us to draw another partnership with the local stakeholders and really push for multi-stakeholder approach. There was a selection criteria during the Go for project. So we changed also the product itself and the program itself. And the last feature that I wanted to discuss is that maturation phase. So once the city got selected, they really also appointed mentors and local experts that handled them through the implementation phase and through the maturation phase with the partnership of the EU. So basically we are pausing. We are pausing the mission move, we are pausing the tenders launch, we are pausing for 9 months, and we ask them to relook at their proposal, to develop a gender action plan if needed, to hire. So each of the cities hired what we call a PEPO, it's a Public Engagement and Participation Officer. We dedicated some budget to have some public consultation, and we're really pushing for them to take the time and to iterate and to experiment and to go back to the end users to kind of crash test the proposition and take the time to fail, restart, and do it right. So that's just one example. It's the example of Agathalas. That's the project in the public open space section, looking at the Horror riverfront and trying to implement recreational area around the river. And that was a public participation session held back in November. So we are still in the maturation phase. We're still very much learning. But I think those key steps are really something that we collectively learned around the past year, because the project got selected in the past year, to take the time and to engage the stakeholders and to put some time in resources is really something that was key here. So yeah, I'm more than happy to answer any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe one quick question for me before I give the floor to Hassan. Just on your social innovation for low-income settlement, may I ask how you, because this is typically inclusiveness as low-income settlement, how do you select those actually? What's the process?
So the team itself got selected after screening of all the smart city projects that were there in the smart city application. So it was all existing projects. So first we had a screening with an anyway to identify what were the key requirements of the city level. That's how we came in with 4 categories. And within, when it comes to the selection of the project during the application stage, all the thematic, the 4 teams had the same selection criterion. The project was selected by high-level independent jury. So, for example, ASD was not part, and EU was not part of the selection jury. It was really given to experts on that subject, and the 4 criteria were on participatory approach, sustainability, relevance and feasibility, and innovation.
Very good answer. So inclusiveness, but you exclude the European Union.
Exactly.
Wow, this is very good. Thank you very much, Valentine. Assad Umar from the Aga Khan Foundation. That's your turn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerome, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Assad Umar, and I represent an organization called Aga Khan Foundation. So here I'm going to share some of our experiences from the Indian state, urban experiences from the Indian state of Bihar, where in Patna city, on the periphery of Patna city, we are working with 3 city councils. So if you just look at the overall objective. Yeah. If you just look at the overall goal of this particular initiative, so it was basically focused around the overall empowerment of urban local bodies for effective service delivery, especially around waste management, so that this can facilitate an inclusive, safe, resilient urban settlement. the three key aspects we focused under this project. It is an ongoing program. One is, of course, to closely work with urban local bodies to build their capacities. Second was to work around the value chain, especially to bring in the innovations, to bring in the technology, the innovative approaches, so that that can be introduced at different levels. And the third and the most important part of this initiative is to engage and with citizens' growth, to empower them to build their capacities for their engagement. As we all know, in terms of inclusive cities, basically we have focused on four aspects. As we know that there are certain issues in solid waste management. The challenges are immense, especially the uncollected waste, the poorly disposed of waste that significantly affect not only the public health but also the overall environment. Therefore, we have adopted a framework of engagement with citizens. Education of communities, the governance, the overall empowerment of local urban bodies, and the demonstration of innovative approaches and technologies. So with this framework, we started working under this initiative. Now, as we all know, there are certain issues, and the similar issues we face even in terms of our own interventions in Patna city. There are issues of limited awareness within communities around waste segregation, zero to minimal awareness around recycling, and limited interaction with service providers. So was the case with urban local bodies. They were really clueless. I mean, in terms of the overall waste that was being generated, unsegregated, what to do with these waste. So that was somewhere the limiting factor with them. Their engagement, as I mentioned, was also very limited with citizens, and absolutely there was no effort at that level to engage with citizens. So what was the solution and kind of framework that we have adopted? As we all know, since last 2 days, we are actually having these discussions, since yesterday rather. There are issues in terms of having good data sets that is available there, and that is where actually we focus as part of our initiatives. We try to map everything, I mean, right from the segregation status to collection part, to its treatment part. We have also tried to look into the overall citizens' perception, their level of satisfaction from the current services. Another key important point which we try to understand under this program is willingness of citizens, willingness of households to pay for better services. And the best part was, even in slum areas, we could manage to find that people are willing to pay for the services if that is ensured, the proper waste collection is ensured at that level. We could also manage to find out that yes, certain amount of money can be collected from these three ULBs, but there were also a lot of issues, especially in terms of treatment. Absolutely, there was no treatment. Certain cases, when we started this initiative, waste were being segregated at household level, but ultimately everything was ending up in the same dumping locations. So those were certain initiative challenges for us. Now, we adopted a sort of 5-pronged approach as far as this initiative was concerned. One was capacity building, as I mentioned, of ULBs. Second was engaging citizens in making cities more responsive through participatory planning and accountability processes. Driving local actions at household level and also at community level. And streamlining informal workforce. That is one of the key components of this initiative, how we can actually closely work with the informal workforce. And the last point was showcasing decentralized model of waste management. Couple of models which I would like to, So what we realized, as I mentioned, that while initiating this program, there were certain things happening around waste segregation or waste collection at household level. But then finally everything was actually ending up in the same dumping yard. So what was the solution? At this point of time, when we, along with citizens, the discussion happened with ULBs. So this land was allotted by the Annapur City Councils. And it is basically, it is not a barren land, it is a legacy waste site with a total area of more than 30,000 square feet. So within that first, we reclaim a portion of around 8,000 square feet of land, and that is where this secondary segregation center is under construction. So this particular center will cater to the need of around 7,000 households. So within Danapur Municipal City Councils, what we are planning that for a period of 3 years, the entire city councils would actually adopt the sort of decentralized waste management processes. Now, how this actually functions? This is one of the best partnership. So how this actually functions? So basically, dry waste that will be collected from catchment area will be to the tune of 105 tons, whereas the wet waste that will be collected will be to the tune of 5 tons, and that will be treated under the segregation center. This is one particular model that we have actually introduced into the program, and this center will be operational by end of April. Now, this is another model, what we call, because everywhere it is really not possible to come up with a sort of larger decentralized waste management or the resource recovery centers. That's how we have introduced actually the concept of mini segregation centers. This mini segregation centers cater to the requirement of around 700 households. Here, the waste collection processes are done by the sanitary workers, but we have also engaged SHG groups within this just to create a sort of awareness creation at household level. The another thing which we have done under this program is actually home-based composting, because what we feel, if home-based composting is introduced within households, so it will effectively create a sort of a barrier for any waste that is going to the dumping site. So far, more than 1,500 households are doing home composting within that. We have also partnered with temple committees, especially to look into the flower waste. That is another key component that we have introduced under this program. I'm not getting into the details, but here briefly the overall functioning of this mini segregation centers are actually given here. So how wastes are collected, how awareness is being created, how we have partnered with sanitary workers, so everything is given here. The next point which I would like to share as part of this initiative. Yeah. So as I mentioned that as part of this initiative, not only appropriate solutions that were introduced, but we closely work with citizens. We have introduced here the participatory golden stool, for example, citizens report card. Yeah. For example, citizens report card, as well as the public hearing processes. At the moment, under 3 ULBs, more than 1,100 citizens leaders are actively participating in different planning processes, in the regular processes. 2 public hearings have so far happened, and that has actually helped to bring in improvement in the overall services. Just I'll take another minute to conclude. So, another key point of this initiative is to work with the waste pickers. Waste pickers are an important under the value chain, an important part. And the waste pickers are actually engaged. So we have linked waste pickers with urban local bodies. They are getting all the necessary and required services. They are linked with, they are getting an assured income. SHG groups are also involved. Almost 55 sanitation workers under this initiative, they have been linked with many social schemes of the urban local bodies. I will.
Yeah.
So this initiative has given us an opportunity, and that is perhaps one of the best indicators that how the efforts to work with citizens and to work with urban local bodies can within no time can actually bring in the improvement. Now, Urbanpur, one of the city councils ranked second in the overall city Swachhata ranking. Now, I would just like to conclude that yes, if one can minimize the gap between service providers, the gap between and the citizens, things can improve on the ground. If you can, at the right point of time, can facilitate with different innovative processes, different technologies, things can improve on the ground. This is one of the most vulnerable area characterized by recurring flood conditions, but still communities have demonstrated that yes, if proper processes are adopted to engage citizens, things can improve. And this is something in the state of Bihar, this model, the state government is quite willing to take up in more number of city councils. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was slightly too long, but thank you very much. No question for me because we have to move on. Passion, please.
So we are slightly stretched for time, so I'm going to try and be as brief as possible. We were already unfair that Jan was saying to her, there was gender disparity, Anyway, so, we did a similar project for inclusivity. It was called Equicity in Nagpur. Nagpur is a smart city and there is severe and to moderate criticism for all the smart city work which happens over there. And so we did a project with EU which basically looked at the non-included in the smart city part of the town. And can we bring it back and make the whole city one and include everybody together in the smart city process, and that is what that Equicity was about. But before I go into this, and I think I'll be very brief, I think there are a lot of points which were shared over here, which were from the side of the citizens, of the elected representatives, but the government side is also important. And when you look at the other side, and when you sit on the other side, then you realize that maybe this was the only solution possible within the constrained environment which exists. And and remember, I think whether you are an elected representative or you are a government official, eventually you are a citizen also. And most of our constitution provides equal rights to all of these citizens. And they are able to, generate enough awareness, they are able to intervene, and those processes, those systems are available. It is just that we are too lazy to actually, implement those things and take up our rights. And so that is one part. The other part which I think is important to understand is that technology is not the enemy. Technology is just an enabler. If it is a tool, we have a clicker, and I can have a pointer of a stick also. I think they do exactly the same thing. I could actually point with the stick also and say that this is what I'm trying to say, and I can use the clicker and I use the laser to point it also. It is the point which is important. It is not how I'm pointing, whether it's by stick or this thing. So technology as an enabler is something which makes things more efficient, more simple, more easy to do with less effort. And that is the efficiency side of it, which is very important. So anyway, this project was a 4-year project. It wanted to actually bring in, as I said, the other side of the town, which was not included in the smart city project, and see how we can do that. So there are 3 things, and I think Kaustav said it very correctly. There are 3 types of inclusions which is required. One is the spatial inclusion. So in a smart city project, what was taken up was the already developed side of the town, which was taken up. And there is a large amount of area which was undeveloped in the Nagpur area. We took up that area. We said that we are going to specifically intervene in the areas of slum, in the areas where there are lesser amount of municipal services available, and that is the area which we looked at. The other thing which was there was social inclusion. So we looked at the marginalized society, and we made sure that organizational diversity is also implemented within the municipal corporation. So that is the other side which we looked at, and that was very important, we thought. Now, the other thing is that most of these projects which we do, and they are generally funded by funding organizations, they last 3-4 years and they don't continue after that. So what do you do about that? So we created institutional mechanisms which continue this process forward regardless of whether we exist over there or not. And in that sense, what we did was we created what was called the Citizen Development Forum, which had the basically, it had a framework and it had a legality from the municipal corporation itself, which included about 75 citizens of Nagpur. They could take their own decisions. They were not elected representatives, but they were allowed to be part of the participatory development process, and which was sanctioned by the municipal corporation themselves. So that brought in. We left. But today also Citizen Development Forum exists, and it takes, every month there is a meeting, every quarter there is a larger meeting, and so on and so forth, which is there. So these kind of things is something which is important to do, and this is what we did. And we managed to engage with almost 200,000 citizens on the ground who were able to interact and participate. And the technology aspect of it which we used was that we created applications which were able to basically, every citizen was able to participate through those applications and intervene in the governmental processes. So which was linked to the smart city side, by the way, also. So we made sure that smart city is not something which we are saying that is a bad thing or this is not to be done. What we were saying is let us support the smart city processes by the inclusive of the equicity processes, so that whole of the city works together. And that is what is required. This is not an adversarial. Urbanization is not something which you need to say that this or that. It is both of them together, and that's, I think, what the Inclusive Cities project also does. So my time is up, so I'm not going to go through this whole thing, and there is capacity building things which we did. We did organizational diversity, we did monitoring and evaluation side of it, and over a period of time, as you can see, we engaged with the citizens directly, and they are still continuing that work, and there were various surveys and all. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Pashin. We will take our last panelist today, Mr. Aravin Uni, please. And then when you are finished, we will open up for questions from the floor. Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. It's a tough session. A lot of people are sleepy, but we'll kind of try and keep people excited and interested in the work that we're doing. So what I will be presenting is from the perspective of policy engagement and how we looked at the city from the perspective of inclusion, and how through policy engagement we have made it more interesting, we have made it more inclusive. To introduce myself, I am representing this organization called IGSS. I'm not going into these details because I think a lot of people I've engaged with already have this, but I will be speaking primarily from one of the teams within IGSS, that is the Urban Poverty Reduction team. This is specifically on the project that we are doing with EU on urban homelessness. So while I will be talking about the work that we have done as part of the project, but we'll be commenting on the overall socio-political scenario and the urban discourse in general. So what is urban homelessness? I mean, there are definitions that you know, but essentially people who are out there sleeping in the open, and you have the figures and numbers. So there are around 1 million urban homeless as per the 2011 census. And by the way our cities have been growing and the way we are kind of urbanizing, it is very, very clear that urban homelessness will not disappear. It is part and parcel of the nature of the urbanization that we are seeing in Indian cities. There are various numbers that are there that kind of represent that. But the problem arises where we come into this contradiction of sorts, not adversarial as my speaker before me kind of pointed out, but the contradiction is essentially of two things: that you have policy frameworks that talk about inclusion, that are very good in terms of laws, policies and schemes and budgetary allocations, but what the discourse is primarily ignoring that. So the smart city discourse and the way it's being kind of talked about everywhere is not, let's say for instance, talking anything about urban homelessness. There is no single smart city that's actually talking about shelters for urban homelessness. And this, in spite of the fact that it is a centrally sponsored scheme and that. Yeah, and we as a society and as urban residents, we are fine with people actually living in the open, and a huge number also dying on the streets. And we as a society are more or less fine, it seems, by the numbers that are there. So the project is a collaboration of sorts between two organizations, IGS and Offer, and I'll be kind of talking of what we're doing in that. It is very important at this stage. I'm sure we've all seen this in our civics and school books, but I don't know if it exists there right now. But something that we should kind of go back to and look at is that how does our policies and our interventions impact the last person, and that's how we kind of, that is our touchstone of what it means to be urban and what it means to be inclusive. What we're doing here, I'll not go into the details. What we're doing here essentially is capacitating civil society organizations to engage on the policy front, and that too by empowering communities on the ground, and to form networks that go beyond the project, the money and the resource. So essentially this is a very different kind of a project where funding is not the criteria, where information and that skill to negotiate and engage with the state is the key turning point. Images that we all know, very tough to kind of practice, picked up from the internet, but essentially conveying the fact that civil society organizations also need to change of how they work and practice. Key successes that we have had, we have managed to kind of break these notions about urban homelessness and what it really means, because the state sometimes perceives it as transitory, they're only here for a few days, so on and so forth. But we have shown through our study, that to a big one, that this is not transitory, this is structural in nature, and there are fundamental problems that we have in the urban. Last slide is very interesting, that 30% of urban homeless that we have surveyed do not have any identity documents. And the debate right now of kagas nahi dikhayenge and all, it does not apply here because they don't have any kagas in the first place. Yeah? So studies that have built on this homeless discourse, policy engagement, that we have managed to go from the outside, and what we have tried to do is that we have to try to popularize and mainstream the urban homelessness issue. Different political parties across spectrum have taken it up now, and we are hopeful that this becomes, I'll just take a minute. There are various civil societies that are now aware and engaging on the subject. World Homeless Day is recognized by different states and state authorities now. And we have managed to, third point, we have managed to influence some of the land use plans. A lot of people have talked about land use plans. Influence those land use plans to incorporate homeless issues and their needs. Lastly, of how NULM SUH is just a policy, but it's just a scheme, but we also have to think of a regulatory policy or a guideline to tackle this huge challenge that we have. And something that is very relevant to how we view our cities, last 10 seconds, is that I don't think that this is not about data. This is not about data, this is not about app, or this is not even about technology. Technology, like Sir has said, is only an enabler. So if you're not pushing the right things using this very powerful tool, we are actually disrupting a lot of lives that will otherwise impact the urban poor and the most marginalized, like the homeless, negatively. So I think we have to keep inclusivity and justice at the core, and this is how we want our cities to be, and not where people are dying in the open in want of shelter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very fitting slide to close the debate. Thank you for that. Look, I think we only have a few minutes left to get some questions and some conclusions from our partners. So maybe we'll simply open the floor here. So yes, the floor is open for questions from any one of you in the audience.
दिलो माइक दिया लो ऑन करून दे
Okay. Yes. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. This session has been very productive, at least in this complex situation of the inclusivity. You managed to present, to have presented this in just within 2 or 3 minutes. And all the projects that you really have are very, very good because you address the fundamental things of what inclusive cities really means, in which we want different stakeholders to be part of it. I have 2 issues here. Number one is this upscaling, because you have done wonderful jobs in many parts of India. How can this? How can we upscale this? Because I have seen some of you have a good collaboration between societies, community-based organization, and also local authorities. But in terms of upscaling, we also need to get the support from much higher than local governments, which is central government. So that's the first question that I have. I know it's a bit complicated. The second, how can we work better? Some of you represent local government, some of you represent research institution. How can we make a much stronger platform, place where this kind of works can be shared? And basically what I want to know is that how can we make a greater impact of things, because I was very surprised that the number of homeless has increased in India. So the one that you presented. So this is our 2 questions that I have. Thank you very much. And once again, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Any one of you to take question 1 and 2? Yeah. Voilà, okay. Nijan, please.
So I just want to address the question Banadia has on upscaling. I'll just again give the example through the lens of data. Now, every smart city has been asked to frame a data strategy because the central government has created a city data policy, and every city has to align to that to make a data strategy. Now, what the central government can do only that much. It is up to the cities to align and make their strategy. And this data strategy, quite a few of the cities have made. But when it comes to being able to use that data for better governance, that has not been told to them. So obviously they fall back on consultants. So upscaling will come when you create a kind of an alliance. So what we are trying to do in our 4 cities is trying to help them create a city data alliance where there is participation from all sectors, be it academia, researchers, NGOs, civil society, even the Slum Dwellers Federation. All of them have a say in saying, okay, this is the city we want, and for that, this is the kind of data we are willing to share, which will go into the strategy. And if this works for one, and it can be shown as a success story, I think it can be done for all the other cities.
So the challenge is being modest. Actually, National Institute of Urban Affairs is now, we upscale to maybe National Urban Learning Hub, and that is basically a alliance of 4,378 cities all on one platform. So that is going to actually increase the platform size as well as the pie size. So every organization which is there in urban framework can actually engage with them and access anonymized data. So you are not selling any data, but it is available for you to then provide solutioning of specific problems within a particular local region. And that is, I think, the beauty of it, because right now most of the organizations which are like ours, we don't know what is the problem, where it is exists, and then only you can go and engage with the local cities, and that is something which we are doing, and I think with NULS this will be addressed to a very large degree.
Thank you. I think that covers some of the elements. Maybe one quick question for me because it's connected to the impact. I was actually interested in maybe Hassan, if you give us, you don't have too much time because you took too much already, but very interesting initiative with rag pickers. What about sustainability? Do you think that it's a model that can actually be maintained? And that's my simple question to you, and it's related to the impact. And then I offer the floor to the two of you to give some responses to Bernard. Please.
So in terms of rag pickers engagement and sustainability, this is what the question is.
The question was, how do you make sure that the model of rag pickers, the model of collection and segregation of waste turns into something that can be maintained forever without public money, without assistance from outside? Can that be made profitable at some point?
Well, I think we have already initiated that process. In fact, because of our sustained engagement at state level, there was a policy decision that was taken that the state is going to ensure a sort of sustained income, per day income for the waste pickers. So that policy is already under implementation. So based on that, in each wards, there will be 2 dedicated waste pickers that will be there. So that is one. Second is, in terms of overall decentralized waste management processes, one is, of course, the citizens' engagement at ward level, the planning part, and the second is the proactive engagement of councillors and the city managers. I think these are a couple of things that will definitely lead to a sort of sustainable engagement for waste management.
Thank you. Kostov, for contribution to a response?
Well, it was kind of apparently straightforward questions and how do you scale up participation. But let me problematize this question. And the problematization of this question is essential to find a correct answer or an appropriate answer to it. Now, Pashim has talked about Citizen Development Forum. I talked about Citizen Forum or settlement committees and so on and so forth. And each story will give you a story of how citizens were organized at the local level or at the city level. Now the problem is that we have 4,000 cities, and then you need at least 1,000 new project, and it's not the scaling out strategy. It has to be mainstream within the policy. The problem is that we still have a constitutional mandate where to form area sabhas, ward committees. Now, if we don't follow that, and then it becomes almost like impossible to talk about another policy to replace the constitutional mandate that each ULP has got. So one is an action from the central government and the state government and the political willingness to institutionalize the participation through area sabhas. Now, if you look at all the national flagship program, SDM, AMRUTs, smart cities, all these flagship programs have talked about, putting citizens at the center of it, but without suggesting a mechanism for citizen participation. So bring back the 25 years old constitutional amendment, and Tikendar has left, but he's talked about going back to the basic. The going back to the basic is to institutionalize citizen space area sabhas. My second response to the question very briefly is that, of course, a platform like UCLG can play a kind of regional, national role, and many international organizations can chip in and contribute to that. But to me, again, problematize the question that who is learning in the city? Is it the elected representatives, is it the officials, or is it the, I'm sorry to say, it would be very unpopular that third-party consultants are coming and learning from the city and taking away the learning from the city. But how do you create a learning base? Bashir had talked about the smart cities and where the area-based development has been the prime focus. Now, you cannot, scale up area-based development experimentation pan-city-wide unless you have a strong learning platform within the city. So, equal investment is required at the city level where multiple stakeholders are learning together, not only to participate, but in the participation process they are making joint decisions, they can influence each other.
Thank you very much. Arabin for
quick word. I think very quickly to Banaria, the question that you asked on state and how do you scale it up. So at least in the project or the work that we have done specifically for this, one thing is very clear that because we have to get some of the policy changes, we also realize that ULBs are not the best space to engage right now because they don't have anything in the first place. So all the policy engagements that we have done or that we have engaged or ensured that we do is mostly at the state level, sadly. We know that in the longer run this is probably not the most beneficial thing to do, but to get those policy changes done we have had to engage with the state. But in the longer run, like Kaustuv is saying, we have to take it to the people, take it back to the people. Unless we do that, that's not going to happen. Lastly, just 10 seconds. I think if this is the image that we are talking of informal cities and of informality in the city, but when it comes to state and how states use this, it still uses it as aberration. And the state or the ULB, which is considered to be all-knowing and they know what they're doing. Sadly, that is not the case, and civil society organizations of different kinds have to work, engage and support them to understand what is this and to not view it as an aberration, but this is the reality of Indian city and you're not planning for this when you're planning for smart cities. You're not addressing this.
Thank you for this. We have to conclude, and it's not really for me to do that, it's for our panelists. So if you don't mind, I will give you each 1 minute to give us the main point. You have less than 1 minute, just one point where we all go home with, we think about it. What's your best solution to promote inclusiveness or inclusive cities? 1 point only. We start with Valentine.
Thank you very much. Talking of going back to basic, I think it's a very basic conclusion on my side, but it's stuck in my head, so I'll keep with that. Is I think we've seen very different approach of inclusive cities in those different presentations, in different contexts, with the different type of organization. One thing that tied us is the question of time, and I think taking the time and allocating time and resources, and when I say resources, it's both financial and manpower, to look deeply in those questions, to actually develop solutions that are fitted to the context, because once again, we all presented very, very different projects with very different contexts. So taking the time, pausing at the very beginning of the project to look deeper in those questions, and not just develop it as a transversal topic that will be a bit broad, for me is the key solution here.
So I think if smartness has to be inclusive, then there is a need to engage on a larger scale, where we are bringing in the entire gamut of the city towards decisions. If we are talking of informed decision making or data-driven governance, it has to come by building the capacity of the people who are actually going to be responsible and for whom it is going to be used. It cannot be just done upfront from an external source.
I think capacity building and take up at the end is the key. So capacity enhancement, but capacity cannot be just the training or upscaling of skills and things. So policy, platforms, all of this is part of capacity. And that needs to be also enhanced, and we have to look at the larger capacity of the city in that respect.
Thank you. One more rule, you cannot use the conclusion of the participation.
I'll try not to. So taking governance closest to the people, many ways to doing it, and to recognize and embrace the informal, yet not romanticizing it. You have to protect and support and regulate. Unless you do that, our Indian cities are not going to be inclusive and sustainable.
Well, I think for me, how we can actually minimize the gap between city government and citizens, that is the key for an inclusive city. One has to minimize the gap between citizens and government should work in tandem to actualize the dream of inclusive city. Thank you.
Well, let me lend voice to what you mentioned right in the beginning, the acknowledgement of stratification in our society. And the stratification based on gender, based on caste, based on economy. So when we talk about citizen participation, it will remain a hollow concept unless we also recognize that not all citizens are equal. So that inequality needs to be taken into consideration while we frame citizen participation policies and when we try to scale up at the city level and also at the state and national level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that sums it up. From my perspective, I will just tell you that there has been, of course, a lot of debate, lots of discussion at the European Union level, and I would just point to you the Eurocities social right for all statement. It's a specific element that has been developed by our local authorities, our cities in Europe. It has been implemented for the first time in Madrid, and I believe there is one or two cities in Germany and in France now that are implementing that. It's just about effective right for citizens along three big principles: equal opportunities, fair working conditions, social protection. And then, of course, when you look at the detail, you have 20 or 25 principles. But my point being the EU and providing the overall conclusion, if I may suggest, and please have a look at that. I think you will have a lot of interesting food for thought and things that can also help you on your daily basis in your local authorities, in your cities, and in your project. Thank you again to the panelists. May I have a quick applause for everybody, please? And the Master of Ceremony takes over. Thank you.
I must say thank you in French. Those are the only two words that I know. Merci beaucoup. Ladies and gentlemen, I think they deserve a bigger round of applause. Fantastic discussion there on inclusive cities. And we would love to felicitate the panelists on this discussion. And to do the honors, first I would like to invite our Director General, Mr. Rajiv Agarwal, to felicitate Dr. Jerome Holmes, the head of cooperation in the European Union, who so wonderfully handled this panel discussion. A wonderful memento from the state of Goa. This is wonderful hand-painted tiles with the famous Mario Miranda's ideas. Also would like to invite Abhijit Garde to kindly come up and felicitate Madam Devjani Ghosh. Thank you, Mr. Abhijit. As they do that, also inviting Girish Sharma to kindly come forward. Girish Sharma, IAS, and he's from Bhopal. To felicitate Valentine Lepont, the French woman. All right. We also have the Honorable Mayor of Jammu kindly inviting himself to come up and felicitate Kaustubh Bandyopadhyay. Also inviting the Managing Editor of Urban Update, Shri Ashok Wankiriji, to kindly come forward and felicitate Hassan Umar. Inviting Shri D.P. Tiwari to kindly come and felicitate Pashim Tiwari. It's a Tiwari United moment. And would like to invite the ever smiling our Deputy Director General Ravi Guruji to come and felicitate the young, talented and brilliant Arvinoni. So quickly write like a group photograph. So would like you to stand for the group photograph. Those of you who are also felicitated them would like to see on stage. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to give them a big, big round of applause. This is truly a group of inclusive cities. Everyone included in the photograph. Thank you so much. Dr. Gerald Pons would like you only to continue on stage for the next moment. We're going to have a signing ceremony of a wonderful agreement